Blundering Bros, because our stupidity is what unites us. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Blundering Bros. Today is Wednesday, January 21st, and we're having a look at yesterday's games of the Tata Steel Challengers tournament with an incredible score of 7-0. White won every single game. Arthur Pipers couldn't repeat yesterday's perfect game and goes for a Sicilian dragon. Gurel plays a line that seems to have been a serious issue for the dragon for years, and makes you wonder why you'd want to play it. Perhaps it's just our blunderful analysis, but if you're not going to have some nice play in a slightly worse position, then why not play 1e5, as so many of the top players indeed seem to have been doing. So white wins a pawn on move 24 as the tactics work in his favor. There's still lots to play for, but they're playing for two results. 31 bishop takes f3 would have seen 32 g5, after which the endgame after bishop takes d1 g takes f6 is winning for white. Black airs on move 38 with f takes e4, while queen takes h2 might have been a drawn queen endgame. For example, 39 queen d7 check king h6, queen e6 check king g7 e takes f5, queen g1 check king a2, queen d4. Afterwards, black already was in trouble, but doesn't defend as accurately as possible. At the end, both players have two queens on the board, but black is just too late to hold it, and Gurel scores a nice win after yesterday's defeat. Next up is a Slav game, which Vaishali seems to have handled a bit too aggressively. Nogerbek shows us a knight on the rim can be an asset with 15 knight h4, which works out well for him as black is still underdeveloped with some weaknesses, including the king. Black goes for bishop takes d4, which isn't best, but even going for bishop f6 and taking on h4 later would have left white with a serious advantage. Nogerbek keeps playing a good game, although on move 25 he misses a chance to play knight d5, which would have been devastating. Those pawns on h5 and g4 certainly don't look so nice now, do they? At this point, Nogerbek makes a few more mistakes. And black is close to being okay again, but unfortunately for Vaishali, she doesn't find the right defensive resources. The rook comes to g5, the knight to f6, the g4 pawn will fall, and it's time to resign. Now on to a Nimzo game by the number 1 seat versus the number 3. Both players seem to play some inaccurate moves after the opening, so it swings from an edge for white to equal. And then Yakubov airs again. Otherwise a solid game by Tang Nguyen, and he gets a very big advantage. Perhaps 33 king e2 would have been best, with a miserable endgame for black. For example, bishop h6, d6, bishop f8, rook takes a6, bishop takes d6, rook b6. So he played knight h4 instead, and black replied h5. Had he taken on d5 instead, there could have followed rook c8 check and g4. So knight f5, bishop f4, rook takes a6, king h7, rook takes f6, and white is winning. The players reached a rook ending, and black resigned as it's completely winning for white. We then move on to the Dutch match, and as we discussed in our video yesterday, we were anticipating a correct draw by the gentleman, unless Mr. Bach would try his luck. It's hard to say what his thought process was like. But what's clear is that 19 bishop takes f3 brings him down a slippery slope, where our Blundering Bros lab analysis indicates that the draw margin would have remained very high after rook ac8 instead. This would leave black down a pawn temporarily, but the c5 and e5 pawns both remain weak, meaning it would most likely have fizzled out after some more moves. Do you agree with this blunderful analysis? In the game, the young buck finds himself under an ever-increasing amount of pressure, both from the position and the clock, and apparently finding it hard to just sit there and wait for the c-pawn to promote, makes some questionable decisions with g5 and rook takes b7. Our old friend Erwin, the friend, with all his experience, knows how to handle the situation and brings home the bacon after some more moves. Moving on, we can congratulate Mr. Oro on his very first win of the tournament. Well done. The queens get exchanged in the opening, and it's a bit more pleasant for white. 15 bishop takes f4 only makes it harder for black, and she's left with weak f and h pawns. '21 king e3, while keeping the d-pawn defended, isn't accurate though, as in this case keeping the e5 square available to one of the rooks and having rook e1 check as an option was more valuable. Mr. Oro was still clearly better though, and keeps enjoying his increasing advantage. Both players had probably seen that 37 knight b6 check was winning for white, but perhaps the other options were even worse, and she should have gone for it anyway. For example, king takes c5, take on d5 with check, king e6, knight b6, king e5. d7, king e4, king c6, king takes e3, knight c4 check, king f2, knight d6, and black is just too late. So black tries to hold on in a different way, but the position was just too bad at this point, so another white win there. Two more games. First, we see Miss Liu playing yet another impressive game against Mr. Svein, who had been doing well so far, and wait for it, blunders beautifully. The opening is an exchange French, and whether the German grandmaster was trying to force the position too much or overestimating how easily a draw would be reached, we don't know. But the indisputable fact of the matter is, he blundered magnificently with 20 bishop f5. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes e4, bishop takes d8, and it's a nightmare for black. Bishop takes d3 would run into rook takes e8 check, so he takes on e5 instead, but that won't change the result of the game either. For the last game of the day, we'll see an accelerated London system. With white's knight on e5 and pawn on h5, black needs to be careful, and 11 knight d7 seems to make things more difficult. Let's quickly repeat the moves up until that point and have a look at this interesting position. So perhaps c takes d4 was a better option. E takes and knight c5. Queen e2, knight c4. Interesting, still not so easy for black. In the game, Suleimanli keeps making nice moves and posing problems for black. Perhaps the 22nd move was critical, and where it really went wrong, Dishmuk. We're not saying it's a walk in the park after f5, for example, but that would have offered much better chances of holding the game. Continuing the game, it quickly goes from bad to worse. With 28 knight takes d5 being the icing on the cake. If black doesn't play queen takes d5, she loses even more material, but it's completely lost either way. 31 rook c8 is a lovely finishing touch, and there you have it. White won every single game for this round. Did you ever run into a streak where you kept winning or losing with one color? Tell us about in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.